Recently, oceanographers have uncovered new evidence that has completely changed our understanding of the Bermuda Triangle. The story of the Bermuda Triangle is no secret, but there's so much that people don't know. Could there really be some kind of unknown force behind the disturbing incidents and disappearances in that patch of the Atlantic Ocean? Or is it all just a bizarre coincidence? The truth is much stranger than you'd expect. The Bermuda Triangle is essentially the patch of Atlantic Ocean between 3 points on the map: Miami, Florida, San Juan, Puerto Rico, and the island of Bermuda. Looking on the map, the triangle itself is mostly ocean, but it also comprises many of the islands of the Bahamas as well as Turks and Caicos. Or at least that's one definition. Though stories of disappearances in the area go quite far back, it was only in the mid-20th century that a handful of journalists began to claim that they might be related in some way, and that the geography could have something to do with it. And it all began with the Miami Herald. Edward Van Winkle Jones, a writer for the Herald, was the first to publish something about the phenomenon in 1950. His article was being widely distributed by the Associated Press. The headline read, "Same Big World. Seas puzzles still baffle men in push-button age." And it presented some compelling evidence. In his article, Jones compiled a list of ships and airplanes that had disappeared in a small patch of the Atlantic, and the many lives that had presumably been lost there, 135 by his count. And they all had something in common. Jones's article included a map that marked the sites of the various incidents. Jones didn't speculate about any specific cause, simply noting that they had all happened within a relatively small area. It wasn't long before others took notice. 2 years after the publication of Jones's article, George X. Sand published Sea Mystery at Our Back Door in Fate, a magazine dedicated to paranormal phenomena. He was the first to point out that the incidents occurred within a triangle-shaped and listed a number of marine and aerial disappearances that fit his hypothesis. 10 years after Sand, author Alan W. Eckert looked at the phenomenon for the American Legion magazine, going over many of the same cases covered by other writers before him. He did point out one interesting thing: a conversation from a missing plane. On the recording, the pilot can be heard saying, "We cannot be sure of any direction. Everything is wrong. Strange. The ocean doesn't look as it should." These chilling words pointed to something far more sinister happening than just a routine accident. And it wasn't the only time that equipment mysteriously failed within the waters of the Bermuda Triangle. The first incident attributed to the Bermuda Triangle happened in 1800. It is the disappearance of the USS Pickering, which was traveling from Guadalupe to Delaware when it was lost, along with 91 souls on board. Very little evidence from the disappearance has been found, and many believe it was lost in a gale. But as incidents began to happen more and more frequently, people started to believe this disappearance was not a normal marine tragedy. The disappearance of the USS Wasp and USS Wildcat in the early 19th century were later potentially attributed to the Bermuda Triangle. Other notable incidents in the area include the disappearance of 2 ships that both departed from the Royal Navy dockyard in Bermuda around 1880. It was about the same time that another strange story popped up, which only reinforced the theory that something strange was happening. A ship named the Allen Austin was passing through the triangle on its normal route between Liverpool and New York City. When someone on the cruise spotted a bizarre sight, another ship in the water seemingly abandoned and moving erratically, though still in good shape. The crew decided to board the ship and see if they could salvage it. What they found was chilling. The crew didn't find a single person, but they also didn't find any reason why the ship would have been abandoned. There was no damage and no signs of violence. The abandoned ship's crews, personal belongings, and rations were still on board. Its expensive cargo was untouched. None of it made sense. Ultimately, the Allen Austin opted to salvage the abandoned ship, but they didn't know what they were in for. While attempting to sail to New York, the two ships were separated during the storm. Shockingly, the Allen Austin came across the same mysterious ship again. That's when things got even stranger. The ship was once again empty, sailing the seas without a crew. The records exist of this incident, which mostly relegates it to the category of legend, but it has eerie similarities with other Bermuda Triangle incidents. One incident that is often tied to the Bermuda Triangle is the loss of the USS Cyclops, the single largest loss of life in the history of the U.S. Navy, not related to combat. The ship went missing after departing Barbados in 1919. There were 306 souls on board. At the time, the Cyclops had been commissioned for use in World War I and was carrying a load of manganese ore when it disappeared. For this reason, many believed that it had been attacked by German forces who denied involvement. But there's a bizarre coincidence that's hard to ignore. The Cyclops' two sister ships later suffered similar fates. Throughout the interwar years, a number of other ships either disappeared or were found abandoned in the area. But then, events in the Bermuda Triangle ramped up again. During World War II, more ships were in the water than ever before, with the U.S. Navy having more than 6,700 ships in operation by the end of the conflict. This meant a lot of ships carrying a lot of cargo were crossing through the so-called Devil's Triangle. During World War II, two of Cyclops' sister ships, the USS Proteus and the USS Nereus, suffered the same fate, with some eerie coincidences. They were both carrying bauxite, one of the main sources of aluminum. Both departed from the same port in the Virgin Islands 1 month apart, and both disappeared. No German U-boats ever claimed responsibility for sinking either, and no further evidence has ever been found. Up until this point, the incidents attributed to the Bermuda Triangle had only involved ships, but towards the end of World War II, things began happening in the sky as well. In July 1945, a patrol seaplane carrying 12 crew departed Banana River, Florida, for the Bahamas, but never made it to its destination. Though the Navy searched for the craft for 10 days, no evidence was ever found. Soon after, World War II ended, but the mysterious incidents in the sky continued. Flight 19 was a training flight of 5 torpedo bombers. They were part of a navigation training flight for the Navy. On December 5, 1945, the tests were in progress over the Bahamas. Their base in Fort Lauderdale and other craft in the area overheard the radio transmission between pilots. As the squadron moved to make their final churn, things got very strange. As we mentioned earlier, a pilot was heard saying, "We cannot be sure of any direction. Everything is wrong. Strange. The ocean doesn't look as it should." But there were more transmissions from the squadron. When a pilot performing a similar exercise overheard someone say, "I don't know where we are," he tried to help. The squadron expressed they were having trouble with multiple compasses and were looking for Fort Lauderdale. The pilot who responded did his best to guide them, but it seemed as if the student pilots wouldn't follow instructions, likely waiting for their trainer to guide them. They were advised to put the sun on their port side in order to find north. The messages that went out indicated they had a plan to fly northwest until they were over Florida. But at a certain point, there were other messages about not having flown far enough to the east. By this time, it was likely that they were all low on fuel. The last message overheard said they'd fly in formation and go down together when the first of their engines dropped below 10 gallons. Still hoping to help, a search party quickly assembled. Those who had overheard the squadron's radio messages had a fair idea of where the planes had been and alerted nearby air bases, aircraft, and ships. One of these aircraft, a Martin PBM Mariner flying boat, was sent to search for Flight 19 1 hour after their last message was heard. Only 3 minutes after takeoff, the PBM-5 sent a routine message, the last one it would ever send. Exactly 1 hour and 45 minutes later, a tanker reported a fire nearby, potentially from an explosion. They approached in an effort to search for survivors, but none were found. The tragedy had now claimed 6 aircraft and 27 lives. This was the first significant flight incident attributed to the Bermuda Triangle, but not the last. There are several stories associated with the Bermuda Triangle that involve multiples of a specific model of ship or aircraft. Aside from the ones already mentioned, like Flight 19 or the Cyclops and her sister ships, there were the disappearances of the BSAA Star Tiger and the BSAA Star Ariel. Both the Star Tiger and Star Ariel were Avro Tudor 4-passenger aircraft operated by British South American Airways. The Star Tiger disappeared at the end of a long flight in January 1948. Nearly a year later, this time on a short flight, the Star Ariel disappeared. Another fascinating story involves a Miami hotel owner and a priest. Dan Burrock, who owned a yacht called the Witchcraft, set sail from Miami with priest Patrick Horgan on the evening of December 22, 1967. They were out 1 mile and anchored to admire the Christmas lights on shore. But then Burrock had to radio the Coast Guard. He reported he'd struck something underwater and needed a tow. They told him to wait 20 minutes and light a flare so they could find him, but they never saw it. The Coast Guard traveled to the area where the Witchcraft should have been just 20 minutes later, right on time, but didn't see a flare. In fact, they didn't see anything. The Witchcraft had a special flotation device in its hull, so it was unlikely that it would have sank at that time. For the next 6 days, the Coast Guard searched hundreds of square miles for the Witchcraft and its 2 passengers. They didn't find anything, nor has any trace of the yacht ever been found since. Author Vincent Gaddis was the first one to use the term Bermuda Triangle in an article titled The Deadly Bermuda Triangle. He later wrote a book, Invisible Horizons, based on the article. Gaddis was known for his interest in paranormal phenomenon, not just the Bermuda Triangle, but also spontaneous human combustion. Gaddis and later writers who took on the subject were more explicit in their opinions about the Bermuda Triangle. To them, the ongoing series of incidents weren't simply coincidental, they were paranormal. It's tempting to look at the laundry list of strange occurrences in the Bermuda Triangle with at least 20 aerial and 15 nautical incidents that are difficult to explain, and search for something that ties them all together. Over the years, many writers and researchers have posited that some sort of paranormal force has to be responsible. But even among this group, they differ on the specific cause. Some believe that within the Bermuda Triangle lies the remains of the lost city of Atlantis, and that their technology may be responsible for the problems with navigational systems above the water. Notorious psychic Edgar Cayce claimed that evidence of Atlantis would be found in 1968, and in a bizarre way, he was right. In 1968, divers discovered a bizarre rock formation while diving off the coasts of the Bimini Islands in the Bahamas. The formation looked strangely like a man-made road, wall or breakwater, though no historical evidence existed of its construction. To many, this seemed like proof that Cayce was right, that the Bimini Road might have been part of Atlantis, thereby placing it within the geographical confines of the Bermuda Triangle. Others with an interest in the Bermuda Triangle claim that different, yet still paranormal forces may be at work, with popular theories focusing on aliens or UFOs being the cause of all the incidents. One theory is that the Bermuda Triangle is a portal to a parallel universe, but there are also a number of natural phenomena that could explain the episodes that have happened in the area. One common thread among Bermuda Triangle stories are compass issues. Many speculate that there is something anomalous in the magnetic fields around the area that affects navigational aids. However, researchers have been unable to replicate these so-called magnetic anomalies. Another possible culprit is the Gulf Stream. The Gulf Stream is a strong current in the area which could hypothetically create currents so strong that they take ships or planes off course, making them difficult to locate. Of course, It's easy to attribute most incidents to human errors, and additionally, the area is subject to strong storms. Another intriguing theory that scientists have looked at when researching the Bermuda Triangle has to do with gas, a lot of it. This theory focuses on the presence of methane hydrates around the continental shelves. To back it up, scientists in Australia carried out tests and even proved that methane bubbles could, hypothetically, sink ships. And as for why these shipwrecks were never found? Well, that goes back to the Gulf Stream, which would be strong enough to carry wreckage far enough that it would be hard to find. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, as the Bermuda Triangle's mysterious tales captured everyone's imagination, one man wasn't having it. His name was Larry Cush. In the 1970s, Cush was working as a research librarian at Arizona State University. These would come in looking for help on various topics, including the triangle. This piqued his interest. Cush and another librarian began researching the Bermuda Triangle. Eventually, Cush had enough information for a book. Cush had started researching the Bermuda Triangle because it was compelling, but after compiling all the evidence, it was clear. Every incident had either been an accident or had been fabricated to fit the narrative. Admittingly, his book was titled The Bermuda Triangle Mystery Solved. In 1980, Cush released another book called The Disappearance of Flight 19, in which Cush expanded on his research of one of the Bermuda Triangle's most remarkable mysteries. He found compelling evidence that explained why the squadron never found what they were looking for. They were actually over the Bahamas when they thought they were over the Florida Keys, so their efforts to navigate toward Fort Lauderdale only sent them further over the Atlantic. So how did Larry Cush unravel the Bermuda Triangle mystery? In short, it came down to a few key factors. For starters, the number of ships and planes lost wasn't unusual when compared to other regions. Plus, when he dug into weather records, he found that many incidents lined up with storms and tropical cyclones happening at the same time. According to Cush, other writers had exhibited sloppy research in their works about the Bermuda Triangle. Others misreported accidents that had witnesses. Ultimately, he concluded that those who purported there to be a mystery about the Bermuda Triangle as having manufactured and sensationalized it all. Further evidence in the years since Cush's book have backed this up. As we all know, for better or worse, no one keeps better data than an insurance company. And Lloyd's of London has reported that the Bermuda Triangle isn't a specifically dangerous area to pass through, and that claims of incidents within the area are relatively low. The Coast Guard has claimed the same thing. Because reports of incidents in the Bermuda Triangle still occurred today, including the disappearance of 2 boys from their fishing boat in 2015 and a private plane vanishing in 2005, researchers continue to take great interest in the area. The Bermuda Triangle is within one of the busiest shipping corridors in the world, meaning there are always going to be more craft there. And so there will always be more chances for disasters. But as long as the mystery draws interest, people will likely continue to speculate about the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle. We can always lean on the wisdom of the legendary scientist Carl Sagan, who said this about the Bermuda Triangle. Statistically, it's a fallacy. Compared with other places in the world as well-traveled as that area of the Atlantic, do airplanes and ships go down more? The answer is no. Why is it always planes and ships that get lost? It's because they can sink in water. If we started losing trains, if we had a Duluth Triangle in which trains began disappearing, that would be interesting. That wraps up this journey.